All things must begin somewhere, but where did the world come from? All people have been born, but where did the first people come from? These are the questions we have asked since the dawn of humanity, and answered with stories. These are the tales of the first things, and how they came to be. Join me, Jaer Christie, as I explore the hidden legends that shape the world on the Mythographist. Season 1, The Myths of Mainland China. The creation of all things. Long, long ago, before people, before animals, before gods, before the world, there was a great cosmic egg. There is none who can tell us how big it was, for no one was there, but it was so big that all the chaos and all the order of the entire universe were wrapped up within it. It was inside that cosmic egg that Pangu, the creator god, began to form. Pangu was not unlike a human, at least in appearance, except for three things. First, he was very hairy, almost like an ape or a monkey. Second, he had two knobby horns on the top of his head, which were part of his mystical powers. Third, and most importantly, he was a giant, far taller than the highest mountains or the deepest oceans, and every day he grew taller. As he did, the space above him rose up and the ground below him grew thicker. This continued for 18,000 years, with Pangu and the above and the below each growing 3 paces every day inside the egg. Pangu grew taller and taller, and his body was pressed tighter and tighter against the above and the below, even as the world grew bigger and bigger, until the egg could hold them no longer. It burst open, shattering into countless fragments, and Pangu and the universe emerged. Now, just as an egg has 2 different parts, the universe divided into 2 sections. The white of the egg was lighter and brighter, and it rose above Pangu's head and became the heavens. And the yolk of the egg was heavier and darker, and it sank down below Pangu's feet, and it was the earth. Pangu roamed all throughout the world, seeing the many wonders of the universe, or perhaps creating them or shaping them from the primordial mists. Or perhaps it was by his sight and thought that all these wonders came into being. For many ages he traveled. After eons upon eons, Pangu grew old and weary from making his ways throughout the cosmos, and just as we feel our age within our bones, he felt his body changing. So it came to pass that one day he lay down upon the ground, and he stretched out his arms and his legs in all directions, and there he died. But Pangu's work was not finished. Even in death he continued to transform. His eyes became the lights in the heavens by which we see. His flesh became the dirt in which we plant our crops. His blood became the rivers upon the face of the earth, and his bones and teeth and inner workings became the veins that run through the ground beneath our feet, filled with metals and beautiful jewels. His hair took root and grew, becoming plants and flowers, grasses and trees. And his far-reaching arms and legs, stretched out as they were, pointed in the 4 directions, one to the south, one to the north, one to the west, one to the east. These, along with his body in the middle, became the 5 mountains, the pillars of the sky. It was not his physical form alone that transformed either, for the breath that left his body circled the whole world, becoming the wind and the clouds. The sweat of Pangu became the rain that falls from the sky and the dew that rises from the ground, and his voice, mighty and powerful, became the thunder. So it was that Pangu, who had released the universe from potential into reality in life, gave his whole self in death, so that not even the smallest bit of him was wasted. And so it is that all things in the world are part of the whole, and everything, even the most insignificant insect or the thinnest blade of grass, has its purpose and its place. However we answer the questions about our origins, The stories that a culture tells form a complex kaleidoscopic reflection of observations, values, memories, and beliefs. The stories themselves reinforce these tenets, forming a feedback loop between the story and the culture to which it belongs, where the two slowly evolve alongside each other. E.T.C. Werner, in his 1922 book, Myths and Legends of China, puts Pangu's story as part of the Taoist tradition, which explains why, despite its parallels with other creation myths from around the globe, it focuses on the culturally significant everything is part of the whole philosophy. I don't think it's out of line to say that its presence in the creation story, literally the foundation of all things, speaks to its importance as a foundational cultural idea. There's not a whole lot more to be said about Pangu's story, though, so let's move on to where the people are. Fuxi and Nüwa make people. When you were young, perhaps you picked up clay from the soil and shaped it into figures resembling humans and animals and fantastical things. You were not the first to do this. In fact, the very first people were made in this way. This is the story of how the goddess Nüwa and the god Fuxi created our ancestors. After Pangu has died and become the earth, the only ones living are the ancient gods. These gods' heads resemble our own, but their bodies are long and thin like a snake or a dragon. Among these gods are the wife and husband, Nüwa and Fuxi. Nüwa looks out upon the lands and sighs. "It is so empty," she says. "What do you mean?" asks Fuxi. "There are mountains and trees, streams and clouds, and a sky filled with lights. How is this empty?" And Nüwa says, "There is nothing that lives here besides us, and we gods are so few. Come, let us find a way to make living creatures that we may fill this place up." And so Nüwa sets off, and Fuxi goes with her. After some time, they find mud beside the river. The mud is thick and sticky and good for crafting, and the two gods sit down and begin shaping all the creatures they can imagine. Some of them they shape carefully, for others Nüwa takes a knotted cord and drags it through the mud, and droplets fly off when she shakes it, and they collect these bits in their strange and diverse forms. And in this way, Nüwa and Fuxi shape every creature that lives and breathes, both human and animal. They work for a long time, and when they are finished, they place all their works in the sun, so the mud will dry. And then they sit down to rest as they wait for their creations to harden. But the weather in their age was no tamer than it is today, and just as Fuxi and Nüwa are drifting off to sleep, it begins to rain. They wake up with a start. Nüwa cries, "Oh, Fuxi, the rain will ruin all our hard work. Quickly, we must bring them into our cave." So they hurry out and gather up as many of the clay figures as they can and rush them into the cave where they live. But the rain begins to fall harder, so Fuxi takes a broom and Nüwa takes a pan, and they quickly sweep the rest of their creations onto the pan and bring them inside. When the figures have finally fully dried, they come to life. Some humans, some dragons, some tigers and birds and cows and fish, and every other sort of creature that you can imagine in the heavens and on the earth. Some of them are damaged from where the rain fell upon them, or from when they had been gathered up so quickly, or from when they had been swept into the pan. But if you have ever made clay figures, you know that once the clay is dry, it is most difficult to repair, and there is nothing that Fuxi or Nüwa can do. And this is how, while some people come into the world healthy and whole, there are others who are born without arms or legs, or with troubles inside their bodies or minds. And they go forth from the cave of Nüwa and Fuxi, and spread across all the lands. When these new people have been living on their own for some time, Nüwa and Fuxi go out to see how they fare. And they see that the humans they have made love to be alive, but they do not know what to do with themselves. Some of them die, and the others do not know where they have come from. These poor people, says Fuxi, we made them, but we have given them no knowledge, nor even taught them how to learn. Come, we must show them their role upon the earth. So they go down to the people. The first thing they teach is the family, that a man and a woman should be married and have children, so that there will always be more people, even when some grow old and die. This is why family is the most important thing. Fuxi is very smart and a good instructor, and he teaches people many things. He shows them how to make nets and catch fish. He helps them raise livestock and use animals to pull carts and move supplies. He invents cloth and teaches people to raise silkworms and harvest their silk. He gives the people laws and teaches them how to govern themselves and creates the calendar so that they may keep track of their days, and shows them how to create coins of metal that they may trade fairly with each other. Perhaps most importantly of all, he carves shapes upon an old tortoise shell. At first, the people look and they do not understand. They think perhaps he has grown old and foolish. But then Fuxi teaches the people what the shapes mean, and how, together, they can have more meanings and represent different ideas. He teaches them to read the signs of nature and to use the symbols and markings to foretell what may happen in the future. So this is why we revere Nüwa and Fuxi as the mother and father of humankind. For not only did they shape us and give us life, but they also gave us the knowledge we needed to grow and thrive and to become the people we are today. Fuxi and Nüwa are commonly held as a god-goddess pair, often as both brother and sister and husband and wife. And that's not the last time you'll hear of a relationship like that in Chinese mythology. In fact, many of this story's details are often conflated with a post-flood repopulation myth that we'll cover in a few weeks called The Hole in the Sky. I've never found a definitive answer on which one came first, whether these two folktales are divergent, convergent, or simply parallel, but as it is, I've tried to differentiate between the two stories as much as possible, so I've skipped the sometimes shared details here. Details of the actual results of creation are different between tellings as well. For example, some versions of the story say that the cord Nüwa drags through the mud yields poor people, and that those shaped by hand were rich people. And the rainstorm, which provides an explanation for people with disabilities, is not in every version of the story. Both Nüwa and Fuxi are crucial in the Chinese pantheon, and both are present in almost every form of this story, which is sometimes split into Fuxi and Nüwa make people, and Fuxi teaches people how to do people stuff. Nüwa is revered as a creator and a nurturer, and she plays a major role in other stories, particularly in the myth The Hole in the Sky. Fuxi, on the other hand, is seen as the teacher, and is credited with instructing early humanity about basically everything, except fire, which was taught by Suiren, whose name literally means fire person, houses, taught by You Chao, literally has a nest, and medicine and herbs, taught by Shen Nong, literally divine farmer. They sound like they'd have stories too, but everyone I talked to about them just said something like, yeah, Suiren taught people about fire. So now you know as much as I do. Fuxi is also sometimes considered to be one of the three sovereigns, revered ancient leaders who shaped what would become China. After the three sovereigns come the 5 emperors, who are then followed by the Xia dynasty, a kingdom referenced in the earliest surviving court records of the Shang dynasty from over 3,000 years ago. There are plenty of details within these stories whose origins we could speculate about, the emphasis on family as a means for procreation, for example, but detailed versions of folktales like this aren't always easy to find in the historical record, so I don't imagine answers are easy to come by. That's part of what makes mythology so interesting, though, thinking about what's seen as important, and when, and by whom. Like we said at the beginning, what's important becomes the story, and what's in the story becomes important. Something that I do really like, though, whether intentional or not, is that with these particular characters and myths we talked about here, which all seem to be widely known and held at the same importance, we start with the universe. And inside the universe, we put people. And inside the people, we put knowledge. Thanks for listening to this episode of The Mythographist. This episode was written, narrated, and produced by me, Jaer Christie, with research by myself and Elena Tung, and music by Xiaoqing Luna Li and the China National Orchestra. If you liked this episode, let us know, and check out the rest of the episodes on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts. Finally, I'd love to hear a creation story that you grew up with, or that has shaped the way you see the world. There are so many stories out there, and the more of them we hear, the more we'll understand each other. Remember, we can't learn if we don't listen. Thanks again, and I'll see you next time on The Mythographist.